Hey everyone, it's Tim from Linessa Farms Specialty and Heirloom Livestock. Thanks for joining us again today. So today we are starting something very special, and that is we're going to be answering your questions online at least every other week, if not more early than that, depending on what we get in our mailbox. So today is October 30th, 2021, and this is the very first question and answer session that we are having at Linessa Farms. And today we're going to be talking about all kinds of things. It looks like we got a little bit of an emphasis on breeding and estrus and things like that. So stay tuned to find out more. Here we are, we've got, looks to be like 8 or 9 different questions that we're going to answer today. So if you have questions, feel free to reach out to us and let us know. You have multiple ways to contact us. You can leave questions in the comment section below this video, other videos. The best way is probably to email us at customerservice@linessafarms.com. Or even better, you can go on Linessa Farms Tack Box on Facebook. That's kind of our forum group. And you can find out all kinds of things there, and you can leave questions for us as well. So again, it's October 30th, 2021 today, and it looks like we've got 8 or 9 questions. So let's just get the ball rolling. Ryan wants to know, where does Linessa Farms get its name from? My last name is not Linessa. So Linessa Farms is actually a mixture of 2 of our 3 daughters' names, Lindy and Tessa. And so we just put Lindy and Tessa together and we got Linessa. So not very exciting, but that's where we get Linessa Farms from, Ryan. So now you know. Let's see, Gene wants to know, is it safe to add activated charcoal to goat feed? Short answer is yes. Long answer would be, I don't really know why you would want to add activated charcoal to your goat feed, but yes, you can. So activated charcoal, it's similar to regular charcoal. Essentially, it's been superheated with some gases, which increases the surface area of activated charcoal. We use it in people medicine for certain cases of possible drug overdoses or poisoning. The thought process is that activated charcoal absorbs specific chemicals and toxins that are in the body. Now, where people get confused about this is they kind of put the cart in front of the horse. And so you always got to look at, what's causing things to happen and why are things happening. So just because we give activated charcoal to people when they overdose on drugs or when they get poisoned to help try to absorb some of those poisons does not mean that you just need to give it free rein to people or to animals and that it's going to absorb poisons all the time. It also absorbs all kinds of things. It pretty much just binds up a lot of things that are in there. That can also bind up healthy things like medications that you may be taking or that your animals may be taking. So not a huge fan of it. I think it's kind of a little bit overrated, and if you're paying a lot to do it, chances are you're not really going to be getting that much out of it. Even in people, there's some anecdotal evidence that people like to say it works for like alcohol and hangovers and things like that. And that's just not true. There's no evidence to support that. So long story short, if you want to give activated charcoal to your goats, I don't necessarily see a reason why you couldn't. But I want you to keep in mind that if you're giving them medications, such as anti-coccidiosis medication, wormers, things like that, that it may actually cause those medications not to work so well. And on the flip side, if you think that it's going to overly increase your animal's health and things like that, I don't think that that's the truth either. So hopefully that answers your question there, Gene. Kessia's Homestead. Kessia, you're one of our definitely one of our original people that have followed us, along with a lot of other people that we get messages from all the time, which we greatly appreciate. But Kessia, just wanted to say thanks for making the videos. You're very welcome. Thanks for watching the channel. I do greatly appreciate it. Bryce W. Says, what is the best way to set up your small farm for kidding? So we have a video that was put out before. I'm going to put a link to that video right here. And we kind of talk about I think it was made more for lambing, but it's all inclusive. Depending, a lot of this depends on the size of the. It depends on the size of the farm that you have is going to determine what needs you have. I like to say you need a kidding pen or a lambing pen. You need about 1 for every 5 animals that you have, assuming that you're not going to synchronize all of your animals. And what I mean by that is if you're going to have all your moms having babies at the same time because you've been giving them hormones or something like that, they could very well, you can need lots and lots of pens. But the reality is for those of you that don't synchronize and don't give artificial hormones and things like that, your ewes and does are going to kind of hit and have their babies at different times, at least a day or so off. So it's not as important. So our kidding and lambing area kind of consists of 3 different areas. We've got a general population area. Then we've got a larger kidding and lambing pen that is probably about 12 foot by 10 foot. And this is just a safe place if we want to put a mom in there and allow her to have her babies without having to worry about her crushing them. We have that there. Once the babies are born, we put them into a smaller lambing or kidding jug, we refer to it. It's about 6 foot by 6 foot. And we're just going to leave mom and baby in there for about 24 hours to get them to bond. This is what we find works best for us. You may find different things work better for you, but I do have the video on it. And again, just check that out. And I think that will answer a lot of your questions. If it doesn't, please contact us with more in detail questions that you have and let us know what else we can do for you there. Hannah wants to know, she's got some mixed information. She wants to know if antibiotics make a ram sterile. So there's a lot of, this is a great question. There is a lot of evidence to support, that tetracycline can decrease fertility, and this goes for human males as well as any other mammals that are out there. So antibiotics are not going to make your animal sterile. I just want to get that out of the way right up front. You do not have to worry about giving antibiotics to your animal and having them become sterile. Especially, when you think about it, antibiotics are very valuable and very important in certain instances. So if you have a sick animal, please don't deny them the medication that they need out of fear that they're not going to be able to have babies. So what ends up happening with tetracycline, and I'm using tetracycline as the example because a lot of medications that we use have tetracycline in them. Everything from the aromycin crumbles that we give to our animals prior to lambing and kidding, as well as things like LA200, which is basically a tetracycline-based antibiotic medication as well. So what the evidence shows is that tetracycline decreases the number of sperm and can also decrease the motility. That is to say that the sperm swim a little slower. Usually after antibiotic treatment is discontinued, you kind of get back into the normal realm of fertility within about 3 months. There's no evidence to support that having to treat your animal with antibiotics is going to make them to where they can't get your ewes or does pregnant. And again, by all means, if they're sick and they need it, then make sure you give it to them. Okay, let's see, what else do we got? I want to save money, don't we all? So one of our viewers is actually, their handle is I want to save money, wants to know about feed for life cycle of ewes. So this would depend on what you're doing with the ewes. If you're planning on breeding them every year, which I assume that's what you're doing. We just put out a video on this actually where we talk about feeding the ewes throughout the year and how much we feed them and when we feed them. And you can see a link to that video right here. If you have ewes that are not having babies, I think 1 flake per head per day of good quality grass hay or grass hay mixed with some kind of legume like bird's foot trefoil, alfalfa, or clover works fine. And I like to start off at 1 pound of grain per head per day. At maybe about 12% and feed them 1 pound per head per day and see how their body condition holds up. If they need a little bit more, give them a little bit more. If they need a little bit less, give them a little bit less. a good opportunity for us just to point out again, when you're feeding your animals, don't fall into the rut of, you keep your big animals big and your littles little, because what ends up happening is the big animals tend to push out the small animals, eat all the feed, they get bigger. Meanwhile, the smaller ones get pushed out, they don't get any feed and they get weaker. So pay attention to your animals when you're feeding them, pay attention to what's going on, and manage appropriately. So again, for I Want to Save Money, just check out that video. If you have more specific questions, let us know. Okay, what do we got here? So Muhammad and Lufia, is it possible to feed lambs only silage? Can other types of plants be mixed into making silage? So silage can be made by lots and lots of different plants. When we think about silage, in many ways, it's roughage, which is good. That's what your animals need. Our animals, sheep and goats, need roughage in their system for them to produce the saliva to keep their rumen acidity where it needs to be. So this brings up a good point. You always have to give them some kind of roughage. You can give them silage, you can give them haylage, you can give them hay, but you have to give them something. Don't ever not give your animal some kind of roughage and just feed them a pelletized feed. What will end up happening is they don't have enough cud to produce enough saliva to keep their rumen at the correct pH. The saliva of the animal itself is very alkalinic, and it works as a buffer to the acidity of the rumen. And so when the animals are chewing their cud and swallowing that saliva, it helps to bring the pH up. That is to say, it helps to keep the acidity down and keeps that rumen from getting wrecked. We see this phenomenon a lot in show animals, show lambs and show goats, is that they're not fed enough hay, they're fed too much grain, and what ends up happening is we refer to it as cooking the rumen. The rumen just gets overly acidic and it destroys the beneficial bacteria and it just destroys the animal's rumen. So, I don't see any reason why you couldn't. I don't see any problem with feeding silage. Make sure that it's good quality silage. Make sure that the silage was made correctly, so you're getting the beneficial bacteria and you're not getting any mold. As many of you know, silage is made with a higher moisture content than hay. So as long as you're not getting any mold or anything like that going on in there, and it is true silage, there's nothing to be concerned about. Some plants that are out there can be affected by things like frost, but that's a whole nother issue that we're not going to get into. Okay, Abu wants to know, he said, I got a pregnant ewe lamb that needs to be dewormed, but I'm afraid to worm her because of possible miscarriage. Do you have any thoughts on this? Also, she is overdue. She's over 149 days today. So two things on that. Pregnancy, as far as pregnancy is concerned, we don't worry too much about worming them. If they need to be wormed, then we worm them. Now, we don't want to put that ewe into any kind of worming shock. So I want you to pay particular attention to that. If the ewe needs to be wormed, then she needs to be wormed. You're going to do yourself a lot more favors by keeping her wormed rather than letting her get too far gone and then worming her. A lot of times when we have complications regarding worming is because people waited way too long to worm the animal. The animal's really, really far gone. They worm the animal, then they get worming shock and they have all kinds of problems. The best thing you can do with worming is to keep on top of it. If those eyelids are white, you've already waited too long. You need to catch it before it gets to that point. There are certain wormers, specifically valbazen, which is a white wormer that we worry about with pregnancy. The label specifically states do not give to pregnant ewes or does. So that is something that you want to keep in mind. Historically speaking, when you look at the evidence as far as valbazen is concerned, they're far more concerned about development during the first trimester, not so much later, but I would say I would avoid it altogether. I personally avoid valbazen with all of my pregnant ewes and does. At this point, I would consider using something a little bit more gentle, like ivermectin, may be the best route to go. If you have an ivermectin issue with resistance on your farm, you may want to consider injectable Dectomax and see where you can go from that. Prohibit probably wouldn't be a bad idea either. If you had to use a white wormer, you could use Safeguard Panicer, and that should work as well. So as far as the ewe being overdue, so said you're at 149 days and you think she should be having a baby and she's bagged out. We're going to get into this in our next question as well. Chances are she's not overdue. One of two things is happening. Either A, she is overdue or getting close to overdue. We don't normally start to get too excited till we get north of 150 days. And the other thing that's more than likely happened is this individual has seen this ewe bred, and he assumed that it took, and it didn't. So what ends up happening in this case is, ewes, so sheep females are seasonally polyestrous. We refer to them as seasonally polyestrous, which means they're going to go into heat during a specific time of the year. This is not true for all sheep, but for a majority. So just bear with me here for those of you that have special kinds of sheep. For the majority of us, they're seasonally polyestrous, which means during a certain time of the year when the hours of daylight get low enough, they start to go into estrus, and they're going to cycle every 16 to 17 days. So in a lot of cases, what you'll see is you'll see your ewe gets bred, she gets marked, or you actually see her get bred, and you write it down in your little book, and you say, okay, she's good to go. What ends up happening is that breeding doesn't take. 16 to 17 days later, she gets bred again, and it actually takes. So what you're looking at now is you got an animal that you're thinking she's going to have a baby. The reality is that she's not going to have it for another 16 to 17 days, but she looks bagged out and she looks ready to go, and it's starting to freak you out. So when we have a ewe that is due to have a baby and it doesn't happen, after a few days, I just assume about 16 to 17 days later, we're going to be hitting again. And you can kind of consider that with your ewes as well. If you have a ewe that has a baby and her buddies didn't have a baby, you can assume that they're going to start dropping their 16 to 17 days later as well. And this holds fairly true for sheep and goats as well. Goats tend to be a little bit longer out. They tend to be about every 21 days, depending on the breed. But that's where you're at with that. Terry says, I have a doe that's been in estrus for over a week. My other doe has been in heat that long, but this is normal for her breed. She wants to know if the older doe is triggering the younger doe to stay in estrus longer. And the answer to this is no. So Terry, the issue that occurs is when we have younger does, first time estrus does, what ends up happening is they usually have very short cycles, and they'll cycle frequently at the beginning of the breeding season, where our older does tend to cycle longer and harder. Over time, as that younger doe ages, you'll see her kind of slip out of that to where she's not cycling as much, but that's more than likely what's going on. So it's more than likely an age thing, not that the older one's having some kind of a weird effect on her. So goats are in estrus for about 21 days, but they'll only go into a standing heat for, depending on the breed, we'll say the average is 30 hours. So even though you may see your doe flagging, or she may be getting bred or whatever, she may not actually be ovulating, and it can get a little confusing. The other thing is sometimes pregnant does can mimic, they can give you like a mimicked ovulation or standing heat where they're pregnant and they'll actually stand for a male. That's not uncommon as well. So long story short, your young doe is acting like a young doe. She's doing this repetitive, quick estrus cycle where she's kicking in and out and in and out and in and out, but she will get better. And then your older one is basically just doing what she's supposed to be doing. So hopefully that answers that question. Last question we have, Buddy, our friend Buddy, he's down south where it's nice and warm, the exact opposite of us up here in Indiana right now. And Buddy wants to know if I can do a video on dry lotting. And the answer to that is absolutely yes. So tomorrow we are going to be doing our video on dry lotting. So when I say dry lotting, what I mean is you have your sheep and your goats, they're not on pasture. You're feeding them in confinement. And for most of you that have, 2, 3 animals, this is what you do. And it's very important. a lot of you think, you know, when you're watching these videos and some of the things I talk about with coccidiosis and worming and things like that, you think, oh, well, these are only things that affect large farms. And that's not true. Having a small farm and having a small confined farm actually puts you at increased risk for things like coccidiosis and worms and things like that, because a lot of this comes down to good housekeeping and good hygiene skills. And we're going to talk a lot more about that in depth tomorrow when we make this video on dry lining for Buddy. So with that being said, I think we had a good first run this end of October of 2021. Thanks for watching our video, and hopefully this takes off and we do more of these in the future. I'm Tim from Linessa Farms, Specialty and Heirloom Livestock. Thanks for joining us again today, and I look forward to seeing you again next time.